Welcome to the Rusted Garden Show, episode 3. Today is going to be about seed starting. So I'm going to use a digital table of contents so you can jump to the parts that you like. We're going to cover your cool season greens. These are crops that get in when the ground is colder. We're going to go to the warm weather peppers, and we're also going to cover herbs, seed starting herbs, and we're going to go over this pretty quickly. I'm not going to show you how I plant everything, but I will put links into other videos that show you how I start the seeds. But I'll give you enough information that you can get started. What I really want to cover is the timing when you start these indoors so that you grow nice healthy transplants and can get them outside. Before we get to that, one point I really want to stress that the pepper plants right here and the pepper plants in here, whoop, I can't grab that one. This one and this one were started at the same time. And the difference is that this plant was purposely overfed with a fertilizer because I want to stress the importance of not overfeeding your seed starts. They don't need a lot. You hear me recommend a lot using quarter strength, half strength, trying to bring down whatever fertilizer you use, the processed chemicals, the water soluble, organics, whatever. Just bring it down to a low level, well below a 555 NP and K. And in fact, all of these are being grown with worm castings and worm casting tea from Vermisterra. It's something I'm experimenting with, and I'll talk more about them in future videos. But right now, just plain old worm castings and worm casting tea is taking care of the plants that you see. And you can see how well they're doing. The point is don't overfeed them. Too often, people start putting in mixed fertilizers into the starting mix, then they give them water-soluble fertilizers, and before you know it, they overlove their plants. They start giving them Epsom salts, green sand, rock dust, kelp extract, all kinds of things that end up concentrating in these little cells, and that's what causes the damage. This plant looks like, well, maybe it's kind of yellow, maybe it needs nitrogen. So then what happens is your plants that are overfed start to change in a way that also look like they could be undernourished. And then people ask on the internet, what do I need to do? And I'll say, well, it's yellow, so have some, give it some nitrogen. And then they give it more fertilizer and the plants really get harmed. Do not overlove your plants. I'm also hosting a new Facebook group called Flower and Vegetable Winners from All America Selections. And I wanted to bring that up because we're going to be giving away seeds regularly. All America Selections is a nonprofit organization. It's been around for over 85 years. And they really do one thing. They do yearly plant trials to find the best new plant varieties out there in the areas of vegetables, fruits, ornamentals, and flowers. And the best new plants become All-America Selection winners or AAS winners. And we're going to be giving away a full complement of the 2018 AAS winners next Sunday. So if you want to go to Facebook, join the group, you'll see a pin post there. Just put your name in there and become part of our group. We're also doing a growing group there, and we're giving away seeds for that. And it's really a way for all of us to grow the same plants, share through Facebook, and really build a nice garden community. So the timing for when you want to start plants indoors is really important. Like I was saying, pepper plants, you can do 10 to 12 weeks. Your cool weather greens really need to be started with a plan that you're going to get them out into the garden in 2 to 4 weeks. And what do I mean by that? They grow really fast. So your cool weather greens, all these right in here, can take a frost. The leaves can actually freeze and they'll thaw, when the warm afternoon sun comes, and the leaf is perfectly fine. They like cool temperatures, 40-degree soil temperature, 40, 50-degree nights, 60-degree days. They start to grow and bolt when you get into the upper 70s and 80s, and they flower. So these are the first plants that go out. So a couple things that are interesting is today is, I think, the 9th, February 9th. I started these a month ago. The same plants that are right here were put into these flats. And you can see the flats here were planted about 5 days ago. So they've really started to grow quickly. So I'm growing these for indoor greens, and I'm going to cut the leaves and take them. So I had a second flat that looked just like this. I moved some of them into here. You can see how quickly they've gotten bigger. You want to time your cool weather greens so that from the time that they germinate, break the surface, you're going to get them out to where you want them to be it inside if you're doing that like me, or into your flower boxes, or into the ground, within 2 to 4 weeks. Or they're going to feel like they're little bonsai plants. They're going to stay small and they're not going to develop as well. So the timing for your cool weather greens is 2 to 4 weeks before you would put them outside. So I had 2 flats like this. I put some in here. These are growing under my grow lights, and I'm harvesting these as cut and come again lettuces, which I just take the leaves, leave the roots in, and they come back. Now there's a couple ways to start your leafy greens. And just to kind of refresh the importance of starting mix. So you want to sterilize your starting mix. You want to make sure that you heat it in some way. And I usually recommend either put this in a bowl, the dry starting mix in a bowl, put in boiling water, stir it up, and then I actually sell these bags now, or you can go ahead and get the turkey roasting bags at the store, and then put your heat treated starting mix in there. I like these bags because I actually now microwave this. I microwave it 45, before we get to that, pre-moisten it, make sure it's moist, and it's just moist to the point that it's wet, but you can't squeeze it and let water drip out. And then I put it in the microwave 45 seconds to a minute, take it out, mix it up, put it in again for another 45 seconds to a minute. Do not put it in for 45 minutes, you'll start a fire. And then I do it a third time. And it really heats it up nicely, and that will cure the issue of fungus gnats. I have not one single problem with all these seed starts with fungus gnats, and that's because I took the time to sterilize the soil. When you set up your seed cells, and again I will link videos, I'll link videos to this so that you can see how I've done it. Put in your seed starting mix, press it down with your thumb, and then put in some more. I call that thumb packing, and you make a nice solid base. Now, for your cool weather greens, your leafy greens, what you're mostly harvesting for salads and stuff like that, there's a couple of ways to seed start them, depending on what you want to do. I sell seeds at my seed shop. This is some of them. These are kale seeds, and this is a lettuce seed. So I'll do this one real quick. The overseeding method, which is right here, I'm going to pull out a couple of these plugs, transplant them, show you what that looks like. 15 or so seeds right into here. These are not meant to grow to full size. These are to make your lettuce plugs or your leafy green plugs. Just mix it in, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch deep. The depth doesn't really matter. Lettuce sprouts really quickly. And this is the method I use for cut and come again lettuces, where I want to grow densely packed greens. I'm going to be cutting the leaves quickly when they're small, leaving the roots in the ground, and then they will leaf again, and I can keep doing that until the warm weather comes. And then just drop a little bit of soil on top, and you have your plug set up for overseeded cut and come again lettuce, and it looks like this. It's really packed in here. Get that out of the way. And I would just go and take this plug. This is about 4 weeks old. Again, it's getting a little bit past its prime, but it's too cold outdoors for me, so I actually grew this just for the video. So I'm putting them in these containers, and they're doing, pretty well. And they're growing actually on the 3rd tier of my grow closet, right at the bottom for bigger plants. But you could just take this outdoors, put it into your flower box, into your container. You can also just break it. Don't worry if some of them die, because you've densely populated this with seeds. And these would just go into a flower box, water them in with a soluble fertilizer, and you've got your plugs ready to go out into your garden. And the reason you do this is because it saves you time. Sure, you could just go put the seeds out there, but it's going to take about another 2 weeks for them to get to size. So you start them indoors while it's too cold. I get too much freeze out there into the 20s. And then you have your plants ready. If I were going to grow these, let's see if I can do this now with wet fingers. If I were going to grow these for full-size leaf lettuce, I drop in just 3 seeds per. I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not. And you can see 1, 2, 3, and I press it down about 3/4 of an inch. I'm sorry, about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 inch, and just cover it up. I will let them grow, and then I will thin that to one plant. After it germinates, maybe a week or 10 days later, I'll just take out the 2 weakest plants, and that will give me leaf lettuce to grow to full size. All right, let me get to the kale. Now, kale will get very large, and we typically grow that for one large plant that's going to give us, nice leaves come later spring and along those lines. But you can also grow it in a smaller size, just like this. This is where I do have a lot of kale seeds all in one area, but I'm going to be cutting it when it gets about this high and just taking the leaves. So it will be, again, a cut and come again. But typically you don't do that with kale. That again can take a freeze and a frost and be okay. You would just, here's kale seed. This is Premier Kale. And they're kind of, good size. It's hard, if I put them on here, you're not going to be able to see it. But I would do the same thing that I did with the leaf lettuce. Let's just pretend, quick recap, now that my hand is dried, I can drop the seeds. I drop them, one seed into each corner. One seed there, press it in, one seed there, press it in, one seed there, press it in. So I do that usually for the kale plants, and I will thin that to one plant and grow my kale this way and get it out into the garden. Kale you can let grow in here for about up to 4 weeks. I transplanted one of the kale plugs into this cup. I want to just show you how I do that real quick. It's pretty simple. You can use a styrofoam cup. This actually says cayenne pepper on there, which we'll use. I put in the date that it was started, the date that it was transplanted. Make sure you put holes in your cups. You're going to bottom water, but if you let any of these plants really sit in a cup without drainage, water's going to sit in here, you're going to get root rot, and the plant is going to suffer and die. But make sure you put holes in it. I like the styrofoam cups because you can reuse them for up to really 3 or 4 years and just cross out the name and just write on there what you're doing. Or you can put them in 4-inch pots just like this. I usually use these for tomatoes or bigger transplants. Not bigger transplants, but transplants are going to stay in here longer. My tomatoes, my peppers might stay in here for 6 weeks, up to 10 weeks for the peppers. The kale won't stay in here too long because remember, it's a cool weather crop, so it's going to get out into the garden more quickly. So to do that, I use the starting mix because it's sterile again. You could go to a potting mix. The potting mixes usually find in stores are perfectly fine for growing things, but they're sometimes kept outside. They're going to have the fungus gnat eggs. And if you bring in the potting mix now and start using it, even though these plants are bigger and can really maybe handle some fungus gnat issues, they're going to go from here into your seed starts. And it's when you only have a little bit of space like this, the fungus gnats get in there and they just shred the roots of your seedlings down. So I use the starting mix, fill it about there, put my finger in and just make a nice hole in there for the plant to drop in. Let's see if I can grab some kale out of here. All right, this is one that's a little over planted. Let's grab this one. All right. This is the Premier Kale. There are 2 plants right in here. Again, put 2 or 3 seeds in. You don't want to just use 1 seed and wait around for something that's not going to germinate. Also, just as a tip, no matter how much light I give these and how close I put the kale to the lights, they tend to be a little bit weak down at the bottom for whatever reason. Don't worry about that. You just pinch out 2 of your plants. Let me form this again. Form the little ditch, the little hole there. Drop this right into there. And I'm going to bury this, let's see if I can do this, to about here. It'll give it some support and some strength. Press it in. You really don't want to have super loose starting mix. The plants just flop around. And that's how I would transplant up the kale. Again, you only need 1 plant, so I would thin this down. You could, if you want, if you're careful, you could break it in half and put 2 in there. But that's the basic way that I up pot my kales, even my lettuces. I think we had one Well, let's just pull it out. Same thing. If I wanted these to grow a little bit longer, though I do recommend having these go right outdoors, I would just break it down the middle. And let's just pretend that this is a flower pot outdoors, you know, full of your, whatever you have out there, your potting mix. I would just make a hole in my flower box or my container, and I would just drop these plugs in just like that, not even worrying that much about them. Water it in with a water-soluble fertilizer, and I have my whole deck, my flower boxes all taken care of. All right, so these are the leafy greens that like 40, 50 degree nights, the cool nights, cool soil, and 60 degree days, lower 70 degree days. And you want to time this so that from the time they germinate, 2 to 4 weeks, you're putting them wherever you want them to go. All right, let's go over to the peppers now. Let me clear this up and we'll get to that. All right, pepper plants. Now, pepper plants are warm season crops. And what that means, unlike the cool weather crops, they like 50 degree soil temperature, 50 to 60 degree nights, upper 70, 80 degree days. They like the warmth. And the warmth is what allows them to really flourish and start growing. So you don't want to get these outdoors when the temperatures are 40 degrees at night, the soil is 40 degrees, or they're just going to sit there. So timing wise, for pepper plants, you can grow them indoors really 10 to 12 weeks. So I want mine to get out around, I don't know, let's just say May 15th. So I go back 4 weeks, April 15th, 4 more weeks, March 15th, 4 more weeks, February 15th. So 12 weeks. And the reason I'm doing 12 weeks is I just want to get bigger plants. When my plants get to this size, a little bit bigger, they'll go into these cups. I'll show you how I do that. When they get a little bit bigger after that, I pinch the tops off. It makes bushier, stockier plants, and I'll address that in future videos. Just on the side note, I've already shot this video once, except my sound mic batteries ran out and everything was silent. So I'm reshooting it again, decided to pour myself a beer. So cheers to hopefully everything working out in this video. Okay, so warm weather crops, going back 12 weeks to today, and the plan is to make sure your tomatoes, your peppers get into warm ground, warm nights, warm days. So about a week ago, these are my actual peppers that I'll be putting out into the garden. These are actually All America Selection winners too. These are some of the seeds we'll be giving away. And I just put 2 seeds into each side, drop them down about 1/4 inch, and they're good to go. They go into the grow lights. But let me just show you that real quick. So 2 pepper seeds, excuse me. And the reason you want to do 2 is because if you just put in 1 seed, it doesn't germinate or you have a problem, you're going to be sitting around waiting for the seed. So 2 seeds, 1 in each corner. I just put it down 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. I've done videos before where I put tomato and pepper seeds down at the bottom here, halfway and up top. It doesn't matter. Don't over stress about the depth of your seeds. That was a timer on my grow lights going off. I'm going to slowly walk over here and turn it back on for the light. And we'll pretend that didn't happen. So, drop it in and cover it up, and you would go ahead and just label it with whatever you want to label it. And it would go right in to your seed starting kit or into your seed flat tray. Now, the other episodes talked about the grow lights and stuff. So pepper seeds like warmth, so sometimes they're slow to germinate. Different varieties of seeds, of different varieties of plants will germinate at different times. So pepper seed can germinate anywhere from 7 days up to 28 days. And for some reason, the hotter peppers seem to take longer to germinate. So don't lose hope if it's 3 weeks and your peppers have not germinated. All these plants go under my grow lights and that temperature sits around 70, 75 degrees and they all germinate perfectly fine. Peppers do get a boost. If you were to use a heating mat, the heating mat goes under here, raises the temperature usually above 80 and they germinate a lot quicker. That's the only time I really use a heating mat is sometimes with my peppers. Excuse me. So once they're planted in the seed starting mix, get them under the lights. Remember, keep the lights 2 to 3 inches above your seed starts. I leave the lights on 18 hours when I'm germinating seeds. When they break the surface, I leave the lights on for 18 hours, 5 to 7 days, and then I cut the light back down to maybe 16 to 14 hours. The reason you do that is you want the intense light to hit the seeds that break the surface. It stops them from stretching and being leggy and weak, and they'll just be nice and stocky. Now, when you have pepper plants that are doing well, they're going to end up looking like this. 2 seeds in there. These are wonderfully stocky and sturdy plants. Let me just pull these. So for instance, these are habaneros. So they're a little bit shorter. That tends to be what they do. So sometimes on the plant variety, you want them to grow longer. So the habaneros can, take a little bit longer to germinate, and they take a little bit of time to really get up to speed. But I want to show you this for feeding the plants. This plant, this seed here germinated a lot later than the ones over here. You can see how small it is. These all went into the ground at the same time. But for the point of this discussion here is these 2 leaves right here are true leaves. And a lot of people say, well, when do you fertilize your seed starts? So actually mixed in my soil, I do have some worm castings. Usually I don't put anything in here, but I'm experimenting this year and the results are pretty good. So the seed itself will supply the energy for the little tiny germinating seed, this little seedling. So when they get the first sets of leaves, just like this, that's when I will add some fertilizer to my waters. You can use water-soluble organic fertilizer. You can use quarter-strength chemical fertilizers. I'm actually using worm casting tea and taking care of my plants that way. But you feed the first time when your peppers have the true leaves that look like that. And how often do you do it? There's no exact recipe, just don't do a lot. What I recommend is you have a schedule. If you want to feed them every 7 days, make sure it's every 7 days, track it so that you don't double feed. I recommend 10 to 14 days. As long as your plants are dark, they're doing well, so if you go every 10 to 14 days, if somewhere in between they look like they're struggling a little, you haven't overfed them, you can give them a little more fertilizer. But every 10 to 14 days, mix up whatever fertilizer you use that's water soluble in the water and then bottom water, and that will take care of your plants and they'll do really, really well indoors. So when we get to, where did I put that cup? You can use a styrofoam cup just like this, drop a single plant in there, same way that I did the kale. We'll just do a quick one with a 4-inch pot. And again, because I'm going to be holding my pepper plants indoors for up to 12 weeks, as we get closer to the 12 weeks, I'll go outside for a bit. I want a bigger container. Same thing, starting mix that's sterile. And all I do, put my finger in there, make a nice hole. The seed plug will drop right into that. Now, if you check out some of my other videos, I've grown peppers next to each other and they do really, really well outdoors. I'll put 2 peppers now in a 5-gallon container. They don't really compete for size. They seem to produce really well. So you can put 2 peppers this close together, especially if you're putting them into your earth beds. So pull it out. You can see that the roots are starting to, coil around, but they're not overly coiled. Gently twist the roots around, let the tips start going in different directions. So these have been growing about 4 weeks. So at 4 weeks or so, that's when you're thinking about getting them into the next container. The hole, drop it in, push it down a little bit. We're going to go maybe a 1/4 inch above the soil line here. So for this, we just come, maybe up to there. Press it in, and that is how I pot up my peppers. You would put a label on there. Make sure you do that because there's no way you're going to remember, even if you try and put them in different parts of your trays and remember, hey, these are this or that. It just doesn't happen, at least when you're 51 like I am. You forget very quickly. So these also get put into flats. So as I pot up, I'll be using flats just like this for the plants I still bottom water, and I would just fill this up, you know, about a quarter inch, half an inch. Whatever the pots don't soak up after 20 minutes, I dump out. This is how I pot up the peppers. All right, let me just think. All right, nothing else for the peppers. Let's get to the herbs. The herbs that I'm going to talk about are really the hardy herbs. These are herbs that when you're in a zone where the frost and the freeze comes and you get down into the teens and 20s and have days and days of freezing weather, these herbs will actually come back the following year. They die down to the root level, to the soil level, but the roots support them and they grow back the following year. Before we get to that, I want to show you real quick my onion starts. I've been doing this for years now and it's been really, really successful. If you look into these cells, there's 8, 10, 12 onion seeds in here. These are Walla Walla onions started on the 8th. You can really start these anywhere 8 to 12 weeks before they would go outside. They can take the frost, they can take the cold, they're perfectly fine doing that. And they're almost indestructible. I did a whole video called Indestructible Onions. And the reason is the root systems get nice and wiry. There's probably 15 onions in here. These will be pulled apart. They will be spaced about 4 inches apart in my earth beds, and I will get nice size onions. If you buy the small round onions and you plant them in your garden, a lot of times you get that really thick green growth and a nice flower on top. That's because onions are biennials. So that little onion, even though it's small, thinks it's a second year onion. The first year it got to that size, the second year it's in the ground, it thinks it's a second year onion, and second year onions send up that big flower stalk. If you want nice fat onions, start them by seed. These will stay in here at least, I'll probably get them out mid-March, another 4 weeks. They'll get bigger, this will get wirier, and it's perfectly fine. As long as you're keeping them watered, you'll have this dense clump of onions. Just peel them apart, put them in the ground, and you have nice healthy onions. So this is how I do my onion seed starts now. All right, let me get this cleaned up, have a sip of my beer, and we'll get to the herbs. All right, so now we're getting to the herbs. And again, long video format, but I am really liking this format because I can put in that digital table of contents and you can kind of just skip through and watch what you'd like to watch. And you don't have to go and hunt down 4 or 5 different videos that cover everything that I'm talking about. So I'd like to split herbs up into 2 categories. You have your cold hardy herbs that can really survive the deep freeze and the root system stay in the ground, and as soon as it warms up they come back. So these are the cold hardy herbs. And then you have the warm season herbs, which I'll talk about shortly. So we have thyme, oregano, sage, lavender, rosemary, chives, 2 kinds of parsley, mint. These are all your more hardy herbs that can really, again, survive through a nice harsh winter and be perfectly fine the following year. I overseed most of these. I'm not going to show you how I overseed all of them. I have plenty of videos. I will link that in there. But let's just start with when do you start these. So we have oregano. This has been growing since January 7th, so a little bit more than 30 days. And you can start the cold hardy herbs, oregano, 10 to 12 weeks before they would go outdoors. They grow extremely well in these pots, in these cells. I do transplant them up, like I showed you, into these pots. And let me show you how you save a lot of money. So in here is oregano, and in each cell there's probably 15 to 30 little oregano seeds. I overseed them. You have 6 plugs. If you were to go and buy herbs at a store like Home Depot or something, they cost you anywhere from $250 to $350 for a single herb. This whole thing right here really costs, including the plastic, the starter mix, all that stuff, maybe $1.75, maybe. So for under $2, you get 6 plugs, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. But what you do with these is when they get to really about 4 to 6 weeks growth, this is a little bit young, you just break it down the middle, plenty of oregano in here to form a nice mass in your flower boxes, in your garden. Once these are established, they're going to come back year after year. Put them in a cup. That would be one, just like I showed you the other plants. Put them into another one. That's two. The 6 plants now become 12. It's $36 worth of herbs for less than $2. That's why I love starting stuff indoors. And again, you could go and put these seeds out in the garden when the temperatures are right, when you don't have the freezing weather, but you can get 12 weeks of growth here, and you're going to be able to, it smells wonderful now actually, I could use this. You're going to have 10, 12 weeks of growth, and you're going to have full plants come, later spring, middle of the summer. So we have oregano. Thyme, done the same exact way, overseed it. 15 to 30 seeds in there. Another one. Chives, not quite as many, maybe 15 in there. And chives will do really well. So you got oregano, thyme, chives, all winter hardy. Go out into the garden, die back, they'll come back year after year. Next you have parsley, which is really a biennial. So it's going to grow a lot of leaves the first year. It's going to survive the winter, and then the next year it's going to flower. And it will reseed if you leave it there. So we have flat leaf, Italian parsley, and we have curled parsley. These don't really need 12 weeks. They grow much quicker than these other herbs. So 8 to 10 weeks before these would go outdoors, that's when I would start the parsley. But I started them all together so I could show you what they look like. Next, we get into the herbs that are winter hardy, but you don't overseed them. So this is sage. Just drop in 2 or 3 seeds. They would get potted up like that and then thin down to 1 or 2 plants. But just 2 sage seeds, and they smell wonderful, just like this. But they grow nicely, and you can start these 10 to 12 weeks before they would go outdoors. Then you get to the more difficult. That's a stray oregano. Let's pull that out. This is lavender. This is lavender, 2 varieties. This is rosemary. Now rosemary and lavender can take really up to 3 weeks to germinate. So don't be discouraged if your lavender and your rosemary haven't germinated, or they're taking quite a while to do so. In fact, here you can see how much this one has grown because it germinated quickly, and then this one just germinated not too long ago. So it's going to be a bit sporadic. The germination rate for rosemary and lavender is not high, so I do put in 3 or 4 seeds into each cell, and you hope for the best. But you're going to get enough doing this that you're going to have your own lavender and rosemary out in the garden. And then finally, this is mint. And you can see mint, you actually can overseed it because the seeds are so small, and you're just putting them right on top, and you're just scratching them in because it's said that light does help them germinate a little bit. But have a couple on the top, a little bit below the surface, and see how it goes. But they germinate extremely slowly, and they grow extremely slowly. But then all of a sudden, they'll start taking off when it gets a little bit, when they get a little bit bigger. I don't know why, but that's what happens. Don't be discouraged if your mint seeds take 3 weeks, 4 weeks to germinate. So these are the cold hardy ones. You can overseed thyme, chives, parsley, the oregano, and then you're going to plant 3 or 4 seeds of the rosemary, the lavender, the sage, and you can get them growing anywhere between 10 to 12 weeks depending on which one it is. It's really the parsley that maybe go to 8 to 10 weeks, and then the rest can be 10 to 12 weeks. Now, you also have your warm season herbs, which can't take a frost. They don't like the cold, and you really don't want to start them in here because they grow so fast when you put them out into the garden. But I, of course, did some test germination because I do sell these, and I wanted to make sure they were fine. So you have fennel, which is a warm season herb. You have dill. If you do want to seed start them, you're only growing a single dill plant, a single fennel plant. They get huge. So just drop in 2 or 3 seeds, more like this one, and you would thin it down. Because I was test germinating, I put a lot in there. But for dill and fennel, 2 or 3 seeds, thin it down to 1 plant. You want these to be timed more like the cool weather crops. Once they germinate, you want them to get into the space they're going to be within 2 to 4 weeks. 4 weeks is kind of pushing it, because you don't want them to be bonsai'd here. You don't want them to be miniature versions. You want to get them out so the root systems expand and the plants get big. This is cilantro. Cilantro is kind of in between the warm weather and the cold weather. They can take the cold. They grow more slowly. You can overseed cilantro, break it up into plugs, drop it around your garden in your pots. It will do very, very well that way. And when it gets to size and it flowers, it's a great attractor of pollinating insects. It will reseed heavily. So once you put cilantro out into your garden, it will reseed at a crazy rate. Just let it totally flower, let the seeds drop, and you'll keep getting cilantro. Then you have borage. This is more dill. The borage I really use for bees. They love it, and it's a great source of food for them. And then you have hyssop. Yeah, hyssop and the licorice tasting anise. Is that how you say it? I don't know. Doesn't sound right. But these are warm weather crops, warm weather herbs too. They don't like the cold. Again, single plant, let them mature, get to size, make sure you know where they're going in 2 to 4 weeks. So this covers a lot. Again, use a digital table of contents. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope this is a nice new way to kind of present a lot of information to you so you can just zip through and find what you want rather than searching through 800 videos. Please check out my seed shop at www.therustedgarden.com, and also check out the Facebook group for All America selections that I'm hosting, because we're going to be giving away a lot of seeds every month, and I got a lot of plans for the summer. And I will put that up so you know where to go. Have a great night.